Hello everyone. Last video we finished part 1 of the IT Fundamentals Plus U61 exam guide presented by Total Seminars, written by Scott Jernigan and Mike Myers. That was part 1, which is the basic concepts of a computer. Part 2 starts with chapter 5, setting up and using computers. We're going to be covering this part in chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So this video is about chapter 5, understanding operating systems. The main objectives for chapter 5 is that you will learn how to explain the functions of an operating system, discuss operating system characteristics, describe operating system interfaces, and compare operating system features. Now, there's a lot going to be happening in this chapter, so feel free to go back and review anything that we've covered. This will go through all of the main operating systems or OSs of a desktop or workstation computer. Now, there are 5 main functions of an OS or of an operating system, and I have these up here on the screen. The first one is it provides an interface between the user and the machine. There's got to be a way for you, the user, and the computer, the machine, to be able to communicate with each other. And the operating system allows that to happen. Without the OS, it would be very difficult for you to tell the computer what you want to happen. This can either be using the command line or the GUI, which is the graphic user's interface. Again, point and click, or the screen where it's all text and you type in the commands. The second function is it enables coordination of hardware components. The OS can talk to different hardware devices using device drivers, and every now and then you do need to update the drivers, and that's typically happens through a Windows update if you're using Microsoft or other options for the other operating systems. The third function is it provides an environment for software to function. The applications that you're running in a computer, they run within a consistent graphical desktop environment, which is typically the GUI. And that's what operating systems mostly are going to be used for the GUI. However, they all come with their own command line option. But this provides an environment for the software to actually function so you can use it and see it being useful. The fourth function is it monitors system health and functionality. There's a utility program that will check the storage drives for errors or monitoring for malware. So it's always going to continue to put a pulse on your computer to see how it's doing and if there's any major red flags that need to be dealt with. And those will typically come up in a certain area of the screen, which we'll talk about later during this chapter. And the fifth function of an operating system is it displays structure or directories for data management. This allows you to be able to create files and folders to keep things organized within your computer so you can easily find things, and then you can issue commands to act on those files and folders as well. So these are the 5 functions of an operating system. All of these are described in this screen. We mentioned how the first one is that it allows an interface to happen between a user and machine. And that's, really anything on this screen, on this slide, would show you that you are interacting with it. This one specifically talks about the start menu here, but really any of these you could interact with for that to happen. Enables coordination of hardware components. You can see here under Device Manager box, you can see all the different hardware things that are happening within your computer. Provides an environment for software to function. They just use a simple calculator to show you, hey, I'm going to use this part of the screen as my calculator, and you can see the software running and you can then interact with it. Monitor system health and functionality. You can see that with this scanning. This is doing an error checking, and it's scanning to see how healthy your computer is. And displays structure directories for data management is using this Windows Explorer for the files that you can double click and get into and find your documents. Some important things about operating system characteristics is that operating systems are available in 3 different ways, and these are called licensing. The first one is an open source. Open source allows users to modify the existing operating system to fit the user's needs. Now, most operating systems are not open source. You have to use them the way they were created. However, with Linux, and that's what makes Linux so popular, is that you can create and you can change the code as much as you want to make it fit your need. And remember, Linux and these open source ones are typically free, so they do not cost. The next one is a specifically free licensing system, and it doesn't have to be an open source. It could be a closed source, but they are completely free to download. They are still owned by the company, though. An example of that is the Google Chrome OS. It's free, but it's not open source. You can download it for free onto a computer, but you have to use it the way that it was intended. However, another free open source one is the Linux that we mentioned before. And finally, another licensing is commercial. It's owned by companies that charge money for them. Examples of that are the Microsoft Windows and the Apple Mac OS. These are not free to download. You will have to have a subscription, or you'll have to go to the store, or you could have to buy it online and then download it to your system, to your computer. Software compatibility, when you're dealing with operating systems, you need to make sure you're aware of what software you want to be running to understand whether your OS that you're using can handle that software. Applications can only work for a specific OS. Computers should be chosen based on your application needs. Complexity, you can, as we mentioned before in a previous video, you can have a 32-bit operating system or a 64-bit operating system. Both of them provide support for hardware and applications designed for that complexity. The thing about both 32-bit and 64-bit is that the 64-bit does have backward compatibility, which means that a 64-bit CPU can run on a 32-bit operating system, but a 32-bit CPU cannot handle a 64-bit operating system. So it's important to make sure that the 64 can handle the one before that, 32, but 32 cannot handle the one in front of it, 64. Now, when we talk about the different types of operating systems, the U61 exam covers a lot of them, but there's not a lot of variations within the family. So we're going to cover mostly 6 different operating systems in this video. We have 3 for Windows. We're really only going to talk about 1 of them for Mac, 1 for Linux, and 1 for Chrome. But the 3 Windows ones are a little bit different, and we're going to dive down a little bit deeper within 3 Windows characteristics. And as you can see here, we have Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1 are grouped together, Windows 10, and then we're going to just put the Mac OS all in one category, the Linux in a category, and the Chrome in a category. There are different operating systems for mobile devices. We're going to deal with that later on in the future with Chapter 7. So we're going to start with Windows 7. Now, a window interface, as I mentioned, supports 4 different versions, but we're going to really group it into 3. First is Windows 7. Now, this is a screenshot of a Windows 7 desktop with some windows open. The first thing I want to talk about is obviously the desktop. The desktop is the background of the main screen where the icons are accessed. Windows 7 was the first one to introduce Arrow glass, and this is where the edges of the windows were transparent. As you can see over here on the right hand side, the transparency of the edge of this window, you can kind of see through and see what the background shows. Prior to Windows 7 was Windows Vista, and that did not include the Arrow glass. So Windows 7 was the first one to introduce this new feature. The Start button, as we know, is down in the lower left-hand corner, and this is where you can click to access applications or run commands or do a lot of things to find what you're looking for. The taskbar is this bar at the very, very bottom of the screen, and the area, it sometimes contains pinned programs. These are programs that automatically stay down here. You can pin them to the bottom of your screen, and also anytime you open a application that's not a pinned program, they will show up at the bottom of the screen, but when you close that application, they will disappear. You can always pin a program by opening the application, right-clicking on that icon down here, and then you should have a feature, an option to pin that program to the bottom. So when you close it, you can still see it, and it makes it easier to access later on. So these pinned programs are applications frequently used, and they're stuck to the taskbar, whether they're open or closed. And then finally, you do have a notification area over here on the far right-hand side. Techies sometimes call it a system tray, but these shows programs running in the background. And you can also usually you see some sort of red flag, some notifications that are important, what your internet access is like, whether it's Wi-Fi or directly wired, your sound levels, and then there's an arrow here that you can open up and see more features. This is still with Windows 7. This is a context menu. If you open your Windows Explorer and you right-click, you can see some options of what you can do for that particular icon, but that is right-clicking. Left-clicking will do nothing. Left double-clicking will open that particular icon, but right-clicking will show these features. Next, I want to talk about Windows 8. Now, Windows 7 was a big success. A lot of people loved Windows 7, and Microsoft, being Microsoft, wanted to try to improve. So they created Windows 8. Now, Windows 8 was a travesty. People did not like Windows 8. One of the first reasons people didn't like it is because when you booted up your computer, you didn't go to your desktop. You went to this. You went to the Start menu. And this is where that first introduced tiles. And these tiles can be rearranged and they can be customized, but it's different because you don't have the look and the feel of what Windows 7 was like. So it's very interesting because the Start menu actually has no menu. It's a full screen with tiles which are pinned and selected by the user. Usually when you use the scroll button on your mouse, that allows you to scroll up or down. Well, when you're on the Start menu and you use the scroll button, it actually goes from the left side to the right side. And this is the right side. So some people, again, didn't like that because they wanted to scroll up and down, but the scroll menu actually moved things from left to right. In order to go to the desktop, there was no button to go to the desktop. So you actually had to press the Windows button on your computer. Hitting the Windows button took you to the desktop, and it's a very plain, barren looking desktop. Now there's some things that are still here, but one of the main things that's missing, as you can see, is that there is no Start menu. And again, people did not like this. They didn't like something that they were not used to. So they were missing the Start button. Now again, you can access that by pressing the Windows button to toggle back and forth between the Start page and the desktop, but people didn't want that. They wanted to use their mouse, and it was not ideal. One of the things that Windows 8 introduced for the first time was the Metro or Modern UI, that is the user interface. This was the first interface that allowed touch-enabled devices to work. So before Windows 8 arrived, before Microsoft created the OS, they did not have touchscreen laptops or touchscreen desktops. Windows 8 created an environment for touchscreens to work. If you look down here on the corner, you can see like a little keyboard icon. If you click on that, a keyboard would show up and allows you to type by touching the screen. And that was an amazing thing. It's kind of like using a tablet or using a phone. But again, it still didn't hide the fact that there was a lot of features and a lot of things that were introduced with Windows 8 that people did not like. There was these hidden features with Windows 8 over here on the right-hand side, and you could be able to use this instead of hitting the Start button. You could click the Start button right here and then go back to the desktop. But again, so a lot of people didn't like this, and they didn't appreciate what Microsoft did with their precious Windows computer. So Microsoft listened, and they heard the complaints that the users had, and their solution was creating Windows 8.1. 8.1 was kind of the new upgraded version of Windows 8. And what Windows 8.1 did is it brought back a lot of features from Windows 7 that people loved. It also kept the environment the same about Windows 8, but it was a nice hybrid between Windows 7 and Windows 8, and they called it Windows 8.1. As you can see here, it reintroduced the Start button. You now have a Windows logo down here on the bottom. You've got a Start button. Windows 8.1 introduced the Windows Store app. Instead of finding an app at a actual brick and mortar store or online to download through a browser, they introduced a Windows Store that allows you to find the apps that you wanted, and you could find free ones or you could pay for premium ones and download it through the store. So you would then pay through a credit card or things like that. It made things much more accessible. It's kind of like your phone. You can easily find apps through your device store. It's the same thing with Windows 8.1. They had a store for this, and these were called Metro or Modern apps. As I mentioned, there's a quick access to an on-screen touch keyboard, and you have your desktop again as the default interface. Windows 8.1, when you started up Windows 8.1, it went straight to the desktop. It did not go to the start menu. Again, people loved that, and they wanted that to return, and Microsoft listened, and they did it. Finally, a few years later, they created Windows 10. Windows 10 was a compromise between Windows 7 and Windows 8. Again, it has the modern apps with the store that you could get. It has the start button with a menu and customizable tiles. Now, back on Windows 8.1, if you hit the start button over here, this still took you to that plain tiled screen. It wasn't really a menu, it was full of tiles. That was Windows 8.1. Windows 10 fixed that. When you click on the start button now, you end up seeing this menu. Now you still have the tiles, but you also have a menu option with some familiar things that we saw from Windows 7 and loved. So this is again a hybrid of the start menu from Windows 7 and the hybrid of the start menu from Windows 8. Again, this is similar functions as Windows. It still has a desktop and everything like that with customizable tiles, but everything again is very similar to Windows 7, but it's got a Windows 8 feel, and they call it Windows 10. So those are the three main Windows interfaces: Windows 7, Windows 8, and 8.1. We group those together, and Windows 10. The next one I'm going to talk about is an Apple computer called the Mac OS. And the Mac OS has similar functions as Windows. It still has a desktop, which is the background with the main screen. You can still put icons on it, and you can customize it all you want, which is great. Instead of it having a taskbar on the bottom, it has what we call dock. And this dock has, again, a lot of features that you can customize and add down here, but these have mostly the highly used apps that you're frequently more than others. It is, again, similar to a taskbar, and you can pin apps down there just like you could with Windows. As it shows down here, the things that are running, the things that are currently up, will have this little tiny dot down below it, and you can easily see what is open and what is closed. And the thing about the dock is that as you go through this with my mouse like I'm doing, it's not a live application obviously, but if I did this, it kind of does a 3D effect, and it magnifies the docks that I'm on and makes the other ones a little bit smaller so you can see it a little bit better. Now, instead of a start menu, the Mac OS has an Apple menu, and that's up here in the upper left-hand corner. And this is where you can do similar things that you would with a start menu. You can see the App Store, you can go to System Preferences, you can see, you can make it shut down, sleep, restart, you can log out, but this is a nice little place for you to be able to go to your Apple menu. All right, and then this, yeah, that's your Mac OS. And then finally, we have our Linux interface, and this is mostly a command line operating system, but it does have a GUI feature as well. Remember that Linux is open source and it's completely free. The things that I want to talk about most is, remember, the most popular form of the Linux operating system is called Ubuntu Linux. It's written out up here at the top, Ubuntu Linux. Instead of a taskbar being on the bottom, they have what they call a launcher, and these are the mostly frequented apps on your system that you can easily get to. The button at the very top of that launcher is called the dash button. It is the topmost option, and it's similar to what a start button would be for Windows. If you click on the dash button, you will get, again, all these different applications that are currently installed on your Ubuntu Linux system. And then there is a search bar up here, and they use lenses, which allows you to filter icons in order to browse certain types of apps. So it's nice. And these lenses are also down here. You have the home, you have certain things. This is documents, this is media, this is music, this is pictures, and this is chat or speech or things like that. You can easily filter it down that way, so you can see, do I want productivity apps? Do I want document apps? Do I want pictures or music? So you can use these lenses on the bottom to filter down, or if you know a certain one, you can search for it at the top. And our last interface that I want to mention is the Chrome OS. Again, a lot of things very similar to what Windows and the Mac OS and Linux offers. It still has a desktop. It still has a taskbar, but they call it a shelf down here on the bottom. It's got the mostly frequented apps down here, and you can pin them and you can open them and everything. Instead of a start button, they use what we call a launcher. It's similar to the start button, and you can access all the programs that you currently have. They don't call it a notification area down here. They do call it a system tray for a Google Chrome OS. It's a section down here on the bottom. It shows the status of your computer, your battery life, your Wi-Fi signal, what your sound is, and things like that. Now, please remember that the Chrome OS is built for thin clients. We mentioned this before. Thin clients are internet-enabled devices that have to be connected in order for you to store your files. If you want to use a Chromebook or a Chrome desktop, you have to be connected to the internet to be able to access your things through maybe Google Drive or another online storage system, and then you would be able to save things there. PCs, these Google Chrome OSs, are usually on a PC that has very little local storage, as I mentioned. We rely heavily on the Google Drive. If you do hit that launcher button down here in the lower left-hand corner, as I mentioned, you can see all of the different apps that you want, and you can go through a search and search for certain ones if you know what you're looking for. And then this is the system tray on the lower right-hand corner of the operating system. If you click on the system tray, you can see a little bit more. You can sign out, see who signed in. You can sign out. You can put in a keyboard for a touch screen. You can see how you're connected through the internet, whether Bluetooth is on or not, changing your sound settings and other settings, and seeing your battery life. And these are the Google Chrome Files app. You can easily see where things are stored and access them through that. So these are the OS feature equivalents for each of the four main ones that we talked about: Windows, Mac, Linux, Chrome. If you want to manage your files, you use File Explorer or Windows Explorer for Windows, Finder for Mac, Files for Linux, or Files or your Google Drive for Chrome. If you want to browse programs, you can hit your Start menu or your Start screen. You can click Launchpad on your Mac, and you can click Dash on your Linux or Launcher on your Chrome. And if you want to change system settings, you either have to go to Control Panel or Settings on your Start menu, System Preferences for Mac, System Settings for Linux, or just Settings for Chrome. All right, some common features of all of these operating systems that we talked about is that you do need to execute a program. That's a fancy word for run the program. And you can run program in various different ways. You can click on the icon, double click on the icon. You can open a menu and select the application. That's what the Start menu is. We open this menu, and then you can select a certain one of these, or you can do it from a tile. You have that. You can double click the associated data file in the file management system. You can press a key combination associated with that application. This is considered a hotkey or shortcut, and you can use that. We're going to talk about hotkeys later on. And you can tap that icon on the touch screen or just click on a shortcut. Now, a shortcut is an item on a desktop that is not saved to the desktop. If you have an application saved way deep down in your C drive or way deep down on your hard drive, but you don't want to have to dig down each time you want to use it, you can save a shortcut to the desktop or to your pinned programs on your taskbar and then easily open it. But a shortcut is a application that is not saved where the shortcut is located. Saved somewhere else, but you can access it using that icon. It's indicated typically by a little arrow on the icon. The other thing I want to talk about is that whenever you're executing a program, especially depending on what kind of program it is, you might need to have the right permissions. And so there's this thing called Mandatory Access Control, or MAC. It uses data labels for resources such as files or network services, and they combine it with policies. Basically, it determines who has access to what. If you don't have the right rights to access that particular application, or to download a program or something like that, a little box will pop up and it will say, you do not have the rights, please sign in with your administrator login. And if you don't know what that is, it will stop you from doing that. That again is mandatory access control. The other thing, a common feature with an operating system, is that you want to be able to manage files. With Windows, as I mentioned before, you can use File Explorer or Windows Explorer. That's what this first one is right here. With Mac, you use a Finder. That is, yeah, that's this one. With Linux, you use Files, which is this one. Or with Chrome OS, you use Google Drive or File Apps. When you want to connect to hardware, you can use Plug and Play. That it's basically as soon as you plug in a brand new piece of equipment into your computer, it will automatically try to find the drivers for it, and then it will tell you whether it's ready to use or not. It has automatic driver installation. A message will probably appear in the notification area once the device is plugged in and once the driver is found and it's ready to operate. To connect to the internet, your PC has to support internet connections, and again, these can be wired or wireless. If it's wired, you would use the RJ45. If it's wireless, you need a Wi-Fi adapter. Some computers have built-in adapters, others you can add in with an expansion card. Or if it's old school dial-up, you need a modem within your computer to use your phone lines. Now with hotkeys again, they enable a user to issue commands through shortcuts on the keyboard. Some people prefer to use the keyboard, and there's a certain features that I always use for my hotkeys on the keyboard compared to using a point and click. But these are keyboard shortcuts to execute commands. Your operating system does have hotkeys. Your applications have hotkeys. You can either click Help in either one to find out what those hotkeys are, and some of them will use your function keys, which are above your numbers, F1 all the way to F12. Now here's the most common hotkeys that are important for the U61 exam. If you have a window open, an active application, and you want to shut it down and you don't want to go up and click X in the upper right hand corner, you can either hit Alt F4 if you're in Windows, Command W if you're in Mac, Control Q in Linux, or Control W in Chrome. You have these three things called cut, copy, and paste. Make sure we know the difference between those. And we're going to go through these a little bit more later on, but we'll just hint at it right now. If you have a file or an application that you are wanting to copy, which means you're making a second copy of, you're keeping the first one there and you're making a second copy of it. For copy, you would hit Control C for copy, Command C for Mac, Control C for Linux, or Control C for Chrome. Cutting is where you're taking it away from where it used to be and putting it somewhere else. So you're taking it out and relocating it. Cutting is Control X, Command X, Control X, or Control X. And then pasting is once you've cut or copied, you need to know where to put it. And that is pasting. And that's Control V for Windows, Command V, Control V, Control V. Switching between open applications, if I have a whole bunch of things open, and I'll show you this right now, then you can hit in Windows Alt-Tab. Now I'll do that right now. If I hold down Alt and I toggle through Tab, you can see I've got 6 different things open, and I'm going through. I'm hitting Tab. I'm holding down Alt this whole entire time, but I'm hitting Tab, 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 Tab. And what that does is it changes what I want to go to. If I want to go to the review questions, I could let go, and there I go. We're not ready for those just yet, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and here, and I'm back here. So Alt-Tab allows you to switch between open applications. In Mac, it's Command-Tab or Shift-Command. In Linux, it's Alt-Tab. And Chrome, you actually have a button called the Switcher button. If you have a Chrome device, there's a specific button called the Switcher, which allows you to be able to also toggle between open applications. And if any time you need help, wherever you are at, whatever the active window, the active app is, you can just hit F1 in Windows and a help screen will come up. Or Command ? In Mac. It's not available in Linux, or Control ? In Chrome. These are the most common hotkeys that are important for you to know. Some other common features of an operating system is knowing how to create a screen capture. This enables you to share pictures of your current screen. There is some things that allow you to know how to do it step by step. There's some other options that you can go for it. Most computers do have a built-in screen capture system, and I've got those over here on the side. If it's in Windows, you can hit Windows Print Screen, and Windows Print Screen allows you to be able to do that. You can also, I believe, hit Control Print Screen as well. In Mac, it's Command-Shift-3 for a full screen, or Command-Shift-4 if you want to select an area. For Linux, it's just a print screen button, and Chrome OS, we talked about the switcher button, it's Control Switcher to be able to do that. Now, when you do this, let's just talk about Windows since that's what I'm on. When I do Windows Print Screen or Control Print Screen, then what it does is it doesn't give you any indication that it actually worked, that you actually took a picture of your screen. But if you go over to an email, or if you go to a Word document, then you could hit Control Paste or right-click Paste, and then that image of the screen will be on there. Whenever you're taking a picture or taking a screen capture, you're actually saving it to a clipboard. The clipboard is this kind of invisible place on your computer that it holds all the things that you've ever cut or copied, and then it's going to paste the most recent thing that you cut or copied. The last thing I want to talk about is accessibility options. For people who are working with your computer that have a disability or need some extra help or extra accessibility options, most computers have a way for you to be able to do this. This is people with possible movement abilities in their arms or in their entire body, visual ability, a visual disability with their eyes, they can't see as well or they can't see at all, audio, which means they can't hear as well or they can't hear at all, and then voice commands, they also have this as an option too. Now, this is always going to be under what we call accessibility options. Each computer operating system is going to call it something different, but typically this accessibility or access word will be part of it. These are features that allow operating a PC easier for those with disabilities. Now, with movement, this helps users with limited mobility or dexterity. It allows users to use a keyboard and a mouse with only the keyboard or only the mouse. If someone doesn't have a lot of movement and they only want to use the mouse the entire time, you can go to accessibilities and make it be mouse controlled completely. Or if they only want to use a keyboard and not a mouse, you can do this as well. For visual, this helps users with limited vision or no vision. You can do a high contrast color. You can do larger icons. You can do larger mouse pointers to be able to see where you are. They do a low resolution. They even can do a magnifier, and they have screen reader programs. They will read it to you, especially if you can't see the screen and tell you what's going on. For audio, this helps users with limited hearing. The OS, again, you just can't hear very well, so if there's a sound or something and you don't know what's going on, the OS can either flash or blink when a sound is played. It helps you to know that there's a notification coming up on your computer, especially when you can't hear it. And finally, with voice, this helps users with movement difficulties or limited vision, programs that recognize voice commands and data input. Now, all of these are, again, underneath settings. As you can see right here, this says settings. This is Windows 10 and ease of access. And you've got all these different options here, and there's a lot of other options that you could go through. But you could change it to be best for the person who is currently using your computer. Again, these are either found under what we call ease of access, accessibility, or universal access. They all have the word access in it, and this helps people with disabilities to be able to use a computer better with what they have. All right, that is the end of our lesson. Let's go to the review questions. Feel free to go back and review the video if you need to go back over anything that we've covered. But then we've got 11 questions here to go over dealing with Chapter 5 and what we talked about. Number 1, which of these is not one of the 5 functions of an operating system? A, monitors system health and functionality. B, provides an environment for software to function. C, coordinates the activities of hardware components. D, sends and receives email messages. Feel free to pause the video if you want to think about it before you have an answer. The answer to this question, which is not a function, is D, sends and receives email messages. That's done through the software, but the operating system does not do this for you. The software in the operating system does this for you. So A, B, and C are all functions. D is not. Number 2, which of these is an open source operating system? A, Windows. B, Linux. C, iOS. D, Mac OS. Open source allows you to be able to change the code and use it to your fit, and that would be B, Linux. Number 3, if you have a PC with a 32-bit CPU, which operating system will run on it? A, 32-bit only. B, both 32-bit and 64-bit. C, neither 32-bit nor 64-bit. D, 64-bit only. If you have a 32-bit CPU, it can only handle 32-bit operating system. It cannot handle forward compatibility. So 32-bit cannot handle 64. 64 can handle 32. It has backward compatibility, but not forward compatibility. So the answer is A. Number 4, Control V is an example of what? A, hotkey. B, system keys. C, function keys. D, launch keys. Control V is a hotkey, and that is a shortcut to be able to do something with your keyboard. Control V specifically is a hotkey for pasting. Something that you've cut or copied, you can now paste. 5, which key combination switches between open applications in Windows and Linux? A, F1, B, Alt F4, C, Alt Tab, D, Windows print screen. Now they're asking for switching between open applications. If you remember, I showed you this before. I did this. This was switching between open applications, and how I did that, was using Alt Tab, C. Number 6, which of these is an accessibility option for people who have limited mobility? A, speech recognition. B, high contrast color scheme. C, magnifier. D, windows flashing or blinking when a sound is played. If you have limited mobility, you might not be able to do what you need to with your hands to tell the computer commands, so therefore you want to use your voice. So limited mobility would be speech recognition. High contrast color scheme would be with those with a visual disability. Magnifier is also a visual disability. Windows flashing or blinking when a sound is played, it would be those with an audio disability. So the answer is speech recognition for number 6. What is the defining feature of a commercial operating system? A, open source. B, free. C, not free. D, public domain. If it's truly a commercial operating system, it is not free. C. I always remember commercial are those where you're watching an advertisement on the TV, and in order to buy that product, you would have to pay for it. So it is not free. 8, the dock on a Mac is equivalent to what feature of a Windows 8.1 desktop? A, start button. B, notification area. C, launcher. D, taskbar. On a Mac computer, the dock is located on the very bottom of your screen, kind of like down here with my different things, and this is what I would call for Windows, what I would call my taskbar. So it is it is D, taskbar. Number 9, what feature in Windows 10 is equivalent to Finder in Mac OS? A, File Explorer. B, Control Panel. C, Start Screen. D, Start Menu. In a Mac, Finder is exactly what it sounds like. You are trying to find your files. You're trying to find your applications, your documents. In Windows 10, that would be File Explorer. The Finder shows you all kinds of files and folders and applications, and this File Explorer does the same thing. So 9 is A. Number 10, a blank is a pointer that refers to a file. A, launcher, B, taskbar, C, shortcut, D, GUI. The answer is C, shortcut. This is where it is not stored on the desktop or wherever the shortcut's located. It points and refers to wherever it's located in your system and then opens it from there. So it is a shortcut. And finally, number 11, which OS configuration uses data labels to control resource access? A, services, B, scheduled tasks, C, mandatory access control, D, EULA. This is where we talked about how not everybody has permission to open or download certain things. So a box will pop up that prompts you to put in the administrator's password. That is an example of mandatory access control. It controls the resource access. So only the right people have access to it, and that your 3-year-old child doesn't accidentally download a $300 application onto your computer. All right, thanks for joining me with Chapter 5. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. New videos are coming up very shortly, so feel free to check out the rest of them as they become available. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for joining me. As always, keep on keeping on.